Okay, ready? Yeah. Good morning. I'm going to call to order the meeting, January 14th, 2014, first meeting of the year of the Ventura County Air Pollution Control Board meeting here in the Board of Supervisors hearing room in Ventura. So we'll have a roll call.
Board Member Parks. Here. Board Member Bennett.
Here.
Board Member Foy.
Here.
Board Member Long.
Here.
Board Member Pollock.
Here.
Board Member Morgan.
Here.
Board Member Sharkey.
Present.
Board Member Tucker.
Here.
Board Member Zaragoza. And Board Member Ramirez.
Here. Thank you. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I'd like to ask our newest member, Mr. Pollock, to lead us in the pledge.
Place your right hand over your heart, right hand again.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point, we're going to have the item 4, ceremonial swearing in of our new city representative, who was chosen last week by this city selection committee, and that's Mr. David Pollock from the Moore Park City Council. Welcome. So how does that, who's going to do it, Mr. Pollock?
I'll do it.
Okay, great.
Please stand. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, David Pollock,
I, David Pollock,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
that I will
And
faithfully discharge the offices about
Sure.
enter. Thank you.
Congratulations. Welcome. Bravo. I think it's, as I said earlier to Mr. Pollock, I think it's great to have someone from, another person from East County, in addition to Mr. Foy and even Mr. Tucker, representing the East County, because we know they're certainly affected by these issues that we deal with here. So, thank you. Next item, nomination election of the chair and vice chair for 2014. And I'd like to call upon Member Bennett.
Thank you.
Asked to make a nomination.
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Supervisor Parks for chair, and I'd like to nominate Councilmember Carmen Ramirez for vice chair.
We need a second. And are there other nominations from the board? All right, I guess we can call for the question. Roll call.
Roll call vote. Board Member Long.
Yes.
Board Member Ramirez.
Aye.
Board Member Bennett.
Yes.
Board Member Foy.
Yes.
Board Member Morgan.
Yes.
Board Member Pollock.
Yes.
Board Member Parks. Board Member Sharkey.
Yes.
Board Member Tucker.
Yes.
And Board Member Zaragoza.
Yes.
Great, it's done. So I'm going to switch chairs with Supervisor Parks. It's a great year.
Somebody drop something there.
Thank you. And thank you also, Chair Ramirez, for an excellent job leading us. Appreciate your work over the year. Let's see, so at this time, we'll go on to item 6, which is the minutes of the meeting of November 12th.
Move the approval of minutes.
We have a motion and a second. Any objections?
I have to abstain as I wasn't present.
One abstention? And Mr. Pollock's going to abstain too. So with that, We'll deem the minutes approved, except for those 2 abstentions, and move on to item 7, which is agenda review. Are there any requests to change the agenda as it now stands? Not seeing any requests to change the agenda. We'll go on then to item 8, and this is an opportunity for public comment. And I believe we have one public comment card from Mr. Kevin Tohill.
Good morning, board, staff, and my neighborhood. My name is Kevin Tohill, and I live at Tapple and Walnut Canyon on a small street called Lightning Ridge Way in Simi Valley. I would first like to thank you, the board, and APC staff for all the help you've been providing and assistance in trying to make our neighborhood safe again. I'm here today to ask for a vapor recovery system be required at the Barnett Oil facility located adjacent to my property. This company installed a vapor recovery system previously with a series of lanterns to burn off the gases in the mid-'80s. They filed for an exemption in '89, and APCD approved it in '90. This vapor recovery system was kept in place until 2004, when they turned it off. But they kept the lanterns and all the piping still intact to this day. At what point does a company need to reapply for exemption? And also, shouldn't have the air been tested when they turned the lanterns off? I would like to have their exemption status changed, especially due to the proximity to the residential housing. We are in our homes 24/7 with young kids, and our exposure is quite high due to our living at the home. Why should a vapor recovery system be such an outlandish request from Barnett Oil? I have been told that Barnett Oil had filed an exemption for vapor recovery due to financial burden. I have asked them, and I will ask you, how much was it costing them to keep the previous system on? Under permit 1146, you allow them to release 1.26 tons of gas into our L, which is our backyard. But you do not regulate how much they release, and neither does C.O. Barnett, nor do they measure it. The 1.26 tons is based on the amount of oil that is allowed to be pumped from the facility. It does not include the wellheads burping, which wellheads do burp, which causes excess gases to be released. My belief, more than 1.26 tons, which you allow. So how much do they really release? It should be monitored. I have had several conversations with the staff at APCD, and they have referred to the gases as standard with some trace gases. When I met with Kirby, he gave me an information sheet regarding the gases being released. I have asked for months for C.O. Barnett to test the gases. They have not done so. So I asked, can I test the gases? They said, okay. So in last November, I hired a company, CSC, to test the gases. They did. The results for level of benzene came up above Cal OSHA's exposable limits, quite a bit above, actually, as well as some other gases being present. In this handout I gave you is a copy of the report as well as the effects of these gases. Keep in mind, this test was taken, the canister was placed outside the tank, but the lid was open, releasing the gases just like when the tank burps, the tank's PV valve opens to release the gas. It's the same gases that gets released, mixed with the outside air, so it's the same exposure we have in our neighborhood. The tank was only 4.5 feet full at the time of the test, and the welds had been turned off for almost 4 weeks, for more than 4 weeks, I should say. So as this company turns back on the system and gets production back going, my feeling is the gases are going to be increased. That's my concern. Unfortunately, my attempts to resolve this issue directly with C.O. Barnett have come up short. They have stopped all communications with me. At my last meeting with the city and Chris Bookall from Barney's Electric, he represents the company, he manages the company, he would not agree to a vapor recovery system. And he said Richard Nolly, the environmentalist who did agree to a vapor recovery system, should not have said that. He said instead he would look into the issue and look at options. I then spoke, and he would speak with his mother, Sally Barnett. The last time I spoke with Sally Barnett, she told me that she didn't feel a vapor recovery system was necessary, but she would look into the issues and speak with Chris, her son. I feel the only way a vapor recovery system will be installed is if APCD makes it mandatory for them to, per Rule 71.1B.1.
Mr. Tohill, can you wrap up? Your time has
Absolutely.
been exceeded.
This is how we are going. We're going on almost 5 months now, and Richard Nolly stated that they would put in a vapor recovery system. I'm willing to donate my time, as many of you do, to help my community. I will sit on a committee and work with staff to review the policies and how they're written and better protect our community, as well as keep business operating as good neighbors. Thanks again for your time on this critical issue. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could we hear a report from?
I was just going to
Yeah,
ask.
yes, Mike,
Thank
see if he
you.
has some.
Yes, we've been out to this site on November 27th. My engineering manager, compliance manager, myself, and an inspector walked this site along with Mr. Tohill and one of his neighbors, and staff from Department of Oil and Gas and Geothermal Resources, along with environmental health staff. So we've definitely committed to improving this situation. This is a small lease operated by, it's kind of a mom and pop operation. It has one tank, 3 very small wells. They have voluntarily shut down the 3 wells and buttoned them up so they're not producing gas or any oil at this time. In addition, we've had the tank emptied of all crude oil. There's probably an inch to an eighth of an inch down at the bottom still. So I just want to point out that the tank will breathe even with just air in it. It's a sealed vessel with a pressure release valve, so you know when it's hot, it's going to let some air out, and there's going to be some vapors, but very small amount, and much reduced emissions and odors from where it was when they were operating. And also let you know that I have let Mr. Tohill know that for pursuing something as vapor recovery, I think there's really 2 things to keep in mind. Right now, the oil company has expressed to us a willingness to install vapor recovery, and I'd like to make sure that we keep working with that goodwill with that oil company. And the other thing is the appropriate body really to be bringing these issues to is probably the district's hearing board if the neighbors feel that we're not doing an adequate job of trying to rectify the situation.
Mike, if I just add, so what you're saying is they stopped the production of the well and then pretty much cleaned out the tank then?
Yes, they have.
So are they kind of just stopping everything, or they just kind of put it on hold until they get Mr. Tohill's issue under control? What's going on? Do you know?
It gets a little complicated. The oil operator does not own the property. It's actually held by one of Mr. Tohill's neighbors. And there's an access issue with that neighbor and the oil company. And right now the lawyers are trying to work out when the oil company, do they have access to this lease at any time to go in and do the work. And I think until that question is answered, they're not going to move forward on any major improvements to this facility.
Okay, so but during this time, there's
It's
no
shut
release,
down.
the gases are done, like besides just the pressure issue you're talking about, so there's not a lot to have gas. Most of it should go away for him and his neighbors and everything else
Yes.
while we're doing this thing, and then it sounds like their process, when they can get access, they will put a recovery system in or some type.
That's our understanding.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not what they told Mr. Tohill, but that's what they've let us know, and they've let Belger know that same feeling that they are going to move forward with some type of vapor recovery device.
Okay. So I guess I'm just, from the standpoint of all of us up here, just the idea of, and this in my district, is that Mr. Tohill knows that going forward, there's not going to be pumping, no material there for a while, And if it does, hopefully, from what you're understanding, there'll be some recovery system to eliminate those gases.
That's our understanding at this time, and we'll do everything in our power to talk them into that.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
Councilmember Ramirez?
I have a question about whether or not, I know that on occasion the district has some funding to help businesses install clean air devices, and I'm wondering if there's any possible source of funding for this, if this is in fact a mom and pop that has some financial issues.
I'd probably have to look into that. The district itself doesn't have, our main real programs go towards mobile sources, as you're aware. They're state funds we receive
Right.
to use, and DMV monies which have to be used for motor vehicle projects. There is a California Pollution Financing Authority, and maybe we can look into that if money becomes an issue.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you. Thank you for your follow-up, Mr. Villegas. Our next item on the agenda is board comments. Do any members of the board have any comments? Going once, going twice? Okay. Then let's go to our regular agenda. Our first item is item 10, approval to appoint 2 Ventura County APCB members to the standing committee and appoint 1 to the as a representative of the South Coast Basin-wide Air Pollution Control Council. So right now, I believe the standing committee would be the chair and the vice chair, and then we have to add 1 supervisor and 1 city member. And I know we've been working on a continuing effort, one on the building purchase for our new offices, and secondly, I know this afternoon we'll be looking at the performance evaluation information for our executive director. So the chair appoints. Supervisors interested? Mr. Bennett, would you like to continue since we have an ongoing?
Happy to do it.
Thank you. All right.
I'm opposed to being appointed, not opposed to anybody else.
Okay. And a council member desirous of being on the standing committee? And Mr. Tucker and Mr. Pollock are both interested? Wow. Fight for it.
Newbies get this one a little extra.
Well, I guess then I will just defer to someone who's been on for a little bit and can help with the performance evaluation. So, Mr. Tucker, if you join us, that would be great. And we'll note the new standing committee. Thank you for volunteering. And move on to, we also have okay, let's also have we have a request to be on the South Coast, South Central Coast Basin-wide
Madam Chairman,
Council.
it's 3 to 4 meetings we have a year. We go to Santa Barbara, we meet up there, and just listen to what each county's doing. That's all we do. If no one has that desire, I would do it again.
And I know you've been really good at reporting back
Yes.
for us and all that. So let's go ahead and I'll make that a motion to appoint the new standing committee members, as well as continuing Mr. Councilmember Morgan on the South Coast Basin-wide Committee. Thank you. Are there any objections to the motion? Seeing no objections, then that will pass. And we'll go on then to item 11, which is a public hearing on the adoption of a proposed revision to Rule 54, the sulfur compounds and permit fees.
Chair Parks, members of the board, I'm Mike Villegas, Air Pollution Control Officer. Actually, the person giving the presentation will be Tyler Harris, our newest rule engineer, but I wanted to give you a little background. This is a rule which actually sets a property line limit for sulfur dioxide based on the National Ambient Air Quality Standard. And as your board's aware, that standard was changed by the U.S. EPA, so we needed to modify the rule to make it consistent with the new standard. That said, I'd like to turn this over. I'd let you know that this rule is not going to have a major impact on the regulated community the way it's crafted, the way it works, and he'll touch on this, is best available control technology will push the sulfur dioxide limits to a level where they're not going to create issues with the National Ambient Air Quality Standard. But this rule actually does have meaning. It was the rule that was very important in cleaning up Pacific Custom Materials, working with the State Attorney General to get them in compliance, and did a lot of good for the neighborhood up in Lockwood Valley. With that, I'll turn it over to Tyler Harris.
Good morning, Chair Parks, members of the board. My name is Tyler Harris, and I'm an air quality engineer with the district. APCD is proposing to amend Rule 54, sulfur compounds, and Rule 42, permit fees. Rule 54 limits sulfur emissions of sulfur compounds and includes ambient air concentration limits for sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. It applies to 185 existing facilities with total permitted sulfur dioxide emissions of approximately 266 tons per year. Significant sources include crude oil production, ports, including the Navy base, electricity generation, and a mineral treatment operation. The district is proposing amendments to 3 aspects of Rule 54. Adding the 2010 sulfur dioxide national ambient air quality standard of 75 parts per billion, clarifying the sulfur dioxide emission limit for combustion sources, and clarifying the method of calculating the planned flaring excess emission fees. The district is proposing amendments to Section N of Rule 42 to maintain consistency with the amendments to Rule 54 concerning the planned flaring excess emission fee. On June 22, 2010, U.S. EPA strengthened the federal health-based or primary national ambient air quality standard for sulfur dioxide. U.S. EPA established a new standard for 1-hour average sulfur dioxide concentrations at 75 parts per billion to protect public health from the adverse health effects of sulfur dioxide. In addition, EPA changed the form of the standard to a design value for determining compliance. Since the current ground or sea level sulfur dioxide concentration limits in Rule 54 are inconsistent with the 2010 National Ambient Air Quality Standard, Rule 54 must be updated. The proposed amendments include addition of the 75 part per billion standard as a ground or sea level concentration limit, a description of the design value that must be compared to the standard, authorization to demonstrate compliance using EPA-approved dispersion models or ambient air monitoring at the district's discretion. During the state implementation plan update process in 2000, the U.S. EPA identified a minor deficiency in Rule 54. U.S. EPA indicated the sulfur dioxide emission limit for combustion operations should be on a dry basis and specify the percent excess air. To address this minor deficiency, the proposed amendments include the following: clarification that the combustion emission limit is on a dry basis, additional requirements that the exhaust concentration be corrected for a percent oxygen content based on the type of source, and for sources not listed, a default percent oxygen of 15%. Rule 54 also includes exemptions for certain planned and unplanned flaring on the offshore oil production platforms. To discourage flaring, these exemptions impose a fee for planned flaring in excess of a volume allowance. There were discrepancies between the rule text and the intent as described in the board letter and associated staff report. So the District Compliance Division Manager at the time issued a policy to clarify the implementation of the rule. In order to codify the current policy and practice, proposed amendments include the following: clarification that the baseline period for existing platforms is from January 1, 1988 through December 31st, 1993, and clarification that any new sources that qualify for the exemption will have a baseline period of the first 6 full calendar years of operation. Similar changes to Rule 42, Section N are proposed to maintain consistency between the two rules. The district scheduled a public workshop in August 2013. Staff notified all 185 permitted sources of sulfur dioxide within the district, but no one attended the workshop or sent written comments. The advisory committee received 1 letter of general support for Rule 54 amendments from Phil White, former director of the district and president of AE Group Mechanical Engineers Incorporated. Advisory committee unanimously recommended approval of the proposed amendments in September. U.S. EPA made minor editorial comments on the draft proposal, which have been integrated into the proposed amended rules. California Air Resources Board sent correspondence stating that they had no comments on the draft proposal. The district recommends the board approve and adopt the amended rules and the other recommended actions in the board letter. That is all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ask a question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your report. I just have a question about the public or the public workshop, and you said that no one showed up?
No. No one showed up.
Can you give a little more detail in terms of time and location
We had
and how it
at-
was noticed?
We sent postcards to all the sources, all permitted sources of sulfur dioxide. So everybody in the permit database that has emissions of sulfur dioxide greater than 0, we sent notice to. The workshop was like 3 o'clock, I think, or 2 o'clock on a Wednesday.
Here?
It was at our offices over across the street.
Okay. How is the public, other than the producers
They were
of the...
notified of the website. There's a posting on the website, and I guess that's...
There's also a notices list that many of the environmental groups are members of, and they receive notice of the workshops.
I always ask these questions because it's true in our city too in Oxnard, and when not about this particular kind of matter, but in a lot of issues that theoretically the public members might be interested. People don't show up, they don't provide comments. So I always ask what the mechanism is that we use to inform the public. So I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one thing I think that kind of, if it were me and I'm in the public and read this, I probably wouldn't be there either. Because the paragraph on page 1, so the current permitted SO2 emissions from all permitted operations in Ventura County are about 266 tons of SO2 per year. Since the proposed rule actions do not directly affect allowed emissions or change the limits currently applicable in the affected stationary sources, it is difficult this time to determine if any SO2 emissions reductions will result in these amendments. That would tell me there's not much going on here except streamlining the rules.
That's correct. We're just aligning it with the new federal requirements that were enacted in 2010.
Thank you.
Linda?
Supervisor Toy.
I was just curious, but on your attachment 5 here, as I was reading through this, it gets permitted, possibly affected by these proposed rules, some of these different businesses. And it gives us like the Ventura County Medical Center, Los Robles Medical Center, the Simi Valley Water, water quality plant, the naval base. Some of these things, have effect. What do you mean by proposed rules could change? What's going to affect? What are they going to have to do? What's our local hospitals going to have to do possibly for any changes or anything here? What?
I came up with this list as the largest sources of sulfur dioxide in the county.
Yeah.
But none of them are considered major sources. They're not. They would have to be over 100 tons emissions per year to be a major source. The EPA guidance for doing refined modeling during the process to determine attainment status for the district indicates that they are going to focus on major sources of sulfur dioxide, so things over 100 tons. So realistically, I don't think that they will even look at what we have.
Okay,
here.
but I was just wondering because it says these permitted could possibly affect it. I was just curious if we are going to get affected and what that effect is to some of these.
I don't believe there is going to be any effect. For example, let's take Ventura County Medical Center. Really what they have is emergency standby diesels, which there would be some sulfur in the diesel fuel, but the fact that they're burning California diesel is going to keep them in compliance with this rule.
Okay. So it's up here, but none of these organizations have to worry about this. Okay, great.
So that probably explains why there wasn't people coming to
Yeah,
the workshop
right.
on it.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Are there any other questions of staff, or can we entertain a motion? Yes, please. Councilman Tucker.
On Rule 54-2, attachment number 3, under Section A, line 1, it talks about at the district's discretion, compliance with the ground or sea level concentration limit in subsection B2A of the rule may be demonstrated. Is that referring to that the district will do either one or the other? There's not a third option, which is none of the above, just for clarification?
So I'm wondering, yes.
It's an either-or situation. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question clearly.
Do you want me to repeat the question, or did?
No, if you look at that sentence there, again, reading it again, the district's discretion, compliance with the ground or sea level concentration limit
of this rule may be demonstrated using EPA-approved dispersion models or ambient. Those are the two choices there. I don't see none of the above.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
So the plain language rules in that situation, and there would be no need for interpretation.
Thank you very much.
And then I think Councilmember Morgan has a question too.
Can we take all the staff recommendations and move to approve all staff recommendations instead of going through each one?
That is appropriate. Simply
Absolutely.
moving the staff
Well, at this point,
recommendations
I
as
move that we-
indicated on the page.
I move that we pass all staff recommendations.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Mr. Tucker, Councilmember Tucker. Are there any objections to the motion? Seeing no objections, we'll call that one passed unanimously then. Our next item on the agenda is item 12, which is our rulemaking calendar. Mr. Villegas?
Yes. State Health and Safety Code requires the district to publish a list of regulatory measures scheduled for your consideration by your board each year, and we must publish this list each January. District staff has created a rule development to comply with this mandate. The calendar includes rulemaking activities scheduled or tentatively scheduled to be considered by your board during 2014. The rulemaking calendar lists new and revised rules to implement the every feasible measure requirements of the California Clean Air Act, which we have to adopt to improve our compliance with air quality standards. Also, improvements to existing rules based on industry, staff, or public input, and rule revisions mandated by state or federal requirements. Even though we're not required in the list to include mandated requirements, we include them to make the list as comprehensive as possible and to provide the most information possible to the regulated community. That's all I have. I'll be happy to take questions.
Do we have a question or a motion? I'll make a motion if you don't. Okay, we have a motion, a second to adopt the rulemaking calendar. Are there any objections to that? Seeing no objections, we'll say that one's passed also. Move on to item 13, and this is regarding approval of a DMV grant for $14,267 to General Services Agency for 4 charging stations and for $13,427 for Oak Park Unified School District, yay, for 2 charging stations.
There you go. Yeah, Chair Parks, member of the board, Stan Cowan, air quality engineer. The board first considered electric vehicle charging infrastructure back in 2011, and at that time we were awarded a $200,000 grant from the Energy Commission to do some planning and some guidance type document. That final plan is nearly completed. We're having a workshop this month, January 23rd, to talk about the plan, also talk about future funding opportunities for electric vehicle charging stations because they're such an integral clean air technology. Quick update on our infrastructure. Recently, we completed our second fast charge station in the city of Camarillo at the Camarillo Premium Outlet Mall, and that's operational. The first one we did was for the city of Thousand Oaks at their transportation center. NRG, under an award or in partnership with the state of California for something that they did, they are continuing to fund these stations in the county, these fast charge stations. They call them Freedom Stations. And they're looking at the city of Thousand Oaks and the city of Ventura for future locations and maybe the Oxnard as well. We have approximately 100 of the level 2 stations. There's a fast charge. Those that get your car charged in 45 minutes or so, 30 minutes. The level 2 takes several hours to charge your car, and we have over 100 of those stations in the county, and part of what we're proposing today is also level 2 stations. The 2 projects today we're asking for funding are the Ventura County GSA 2 stations in the parking lot outside this office here, one at the visitor parking lot and one at parking lot A, B, or C. Using DMV fees, we're only paying for the equipment costs at $14,267. The GSA is responsible for the installation, the maintenance, and operation of the equipment. They do have the capability of charging or billing the EV drivers for the power consumed. So they have that access, that ability to get revenue from these charging stations, which I know is a concern. If this is approved, we would just simply amend their existing grant agreement. It's January 14th, 2014 amendment, not 2013 as in the attachment. Also, there's some future funding from the state that is coming up really quickly, and GSA has indicated that they're willing to participate in that competitive process for more Level 2 stations, and that would be at this facility and other county offices as well. So that's hopefully we'll get some more funding for that as well. The second project is with Oak Park School District, two dual stations, one at their school district office, the other one at their middle school, Medea Creek Middle School. Oak Park has a strong tradition in environmental education and district-wide sustainability, and these charging stations not only provide extended range, they provide extended electric miles, so you get more miles on electricity, and they also act as a showcase for the technology so that more people will drive and buy electric vehicles. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Sharkey, then Councilmember Ramirez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have usage data on the existing stations, and can we project on the new stations the kind of use they're going to get?
Yeah, there is usage data generated especially by what's called the charge point stations, and we have that data. We've assembled part of it. It's in the plan that we're working on, so there will be a section on data usage. And what we've seen is that the number of vehicles has increased and the usage has increased, and in the last year it's almost doubled or tripled as far as usage goes. So
I'm just curious how much they're actually getting used,
yeah,
or how alternatively how we get to a point where they're at their maximum usage.
Yeah.
I assume we still have some headroom there.
Yeah, we do have some headroom, but it's the number of vehicles is climbing quickly, and we're going to have to accommodate the more vehicles on the road to allow them to do charging away from home.
Obviously you're not giving me a number, but we're getting adequate usage out of the stations.
Right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Cohen. I know you've been working hard on this and trying to, get this going. And I just wanted to, just for the information of the public and other board members, that Oxnard, we have charging stations that the council has decided not to charge for a period of time, about a year, to see if we can encourage people to come.
You mean charge a fee?
That's right.
Charge a fee, right.
Right. Not to charge any cash or credit, so that we can encourage people to certainly come to Oxnard and spend their money, but also to keep our air a little bit cleaner. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if we can use that to encourage more people to purchase electric vehicles and also use them in our downtown.
Didn't we struggle with, I don't know how you do that, because didn't we struggle with the gift of public funds
No,
with that?
it's our council, our city attorney said it was for the greater good. A public benefit is incurred. Mr. Khan could weigh in.
Including mandates. Additionally, we have mandates on to assure lowered greenhouse gas emissions.
I don't know, but when you talk public
It's a
good, you're talking about a
requirement.
very narrow person has an electric car. I'm not sure you can
No,
say
we're
it's
talking
a
about
public
the air, I think.
I guess you want to make a comment?
I'd rather not weigh
Not
in
rather not,
on,
okay, yeah, we
on
don't-
the city
don't want to
attorney,
pitch you,
his
but-
opinion there. I mean, you always have, you can always get a contrary decision. The old joke goes, when you have two attorneys, you always have work. But, I'm not going to venture to guess on that. It's a different matter when the district funds these projects and how that funding goes and what the actual source of electricity is. And that would be a different matter, and that would be something that, if in fact we do this with some of our funding, that would be an appropriate question to ask and for county council to weigh in on.
Very smart. Very good
Are
answer.
there any other questions?
Thank you.
I have a couple. First, thank you for your outreach and your good work. I'm on an email list of all the notifications every time there's grants available for electric vehicle charging. Question I have on these level 2 ones, which do charge in a couple of hours.
Yeah, 3 or 4 hours.
Are we
yeah.
thinking about putting some limited parking signs there, like you're only allowed to park here for 2 hours?
Yeah, the signage is a critical part of the of the charging station, and it does say for electrical charging only, so you should theoretically just be parking there while you're charging. And there also, you can set hours of usage as
Yeah.
well as another option.
I would recommend that we look at limiting the amount of hours you're allowed to park in that parking spot.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, someone can park and go to work and then come out, 8 hours later, no one else can use it. So
Right.
I would very much encourage that so everyone can use it. And then also, is there any thoughts about the potential for electric buses to use these facilities?
Electric buses would have to have their own dedicated charging stations, which would be part of the part of the fleet, I guess you would say. So yeah, if we can find a volunteer, sure we'll.
We first need to get those electric buses too.
Electric buses is a tough one. That's what I've been studying for years.
Yeah.
And we finally got one being built in California, I think. I hope it's still being done. In Palmdale, they're talking about one being built in Palmdale. And when I went to the MTA to talk about electric buses, you have to have so much of it built in California or built in your area. And so it's one of those, we have a problem. And if you go after these electric buses, who are they called, the ones that you know about, the big name, Gates's buses. Those are built in Canada. And they are Chinese manufactured. They're built in Canada. So it doesn't qualify.
I see. So
I went
it's
through all
not
that.
because they're not viable necessarily,
No, they're
but
great.
strictly because of the
We have rules of what we
regulations.
can do in our
Okay.
transportation here
Well,
in
thanks
California.
for that information. Are there any other questions on this item? If not, do we have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Are there any objections to the motion? See no objections, we'll call that one unanimously approved also then. We're on a roll. Our next item on the agenda is the exciting item of hydraulic fracturing, and Mr. Villegas?
Yes. At your board's November 12, 2013 meeting, I presented an overview of SB 4, or Senate Bill 4, the Pavley bill related to well stimulation activities. One question did come up at that meeting, and that was exactly when would Dogger be implementing the permit requirements for well stimulation activities. The actual full-blown permit program, which will be implemented by Dogger, will begin in January 2015, and in the interim, and they've already started for this year, operators are now, at this time, required to submit to Dogger a signed interim well stimulation treatment notice prior to conducting any well stimulation treatments, which includes hydraulic fracturing or acidizing. This notice must include detailed information on the fluids to be used, including any trade secret fluids. They must be disclosed to Dogger. It must include a groundwater monitoring plan and a water management plan. Well stimulation treatment can commence once the operator has provided all the required information and certifications to Dogger, and Dogger has had adequate time to review and determine that the stimulation treatment notice is complete. In addition, copies of this notice must be sent to neighboring property owners and tenants by an independent third party at least 30 days prior to commencing the well treatment activities. If a notified property owner makes a timely request for water well or surface water testing, the operator is required to pay for such testing by a qualified independent third-party contractor. So as you can see, even though the permit program won't be implemented until January 2015, they've got what looks and it walks and quacks like a permit program in practice right now. So I think things have really changed in the field of regulating hydraulic fracturing and acidizing. We also have Bruce Hessen here from Dogger, if there are any additional questions.
Comment here, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I was in a legislative conference last week in Sacramento, and we hit a lot of legislators, groups of us did, on different issues. One of those, on the side, I went to Hannibeth and said thank you for putting together a bill that nobody's happy with, but it works.
You mean Fran Pavley?
Yes, no, I'm talking about Hannibeth Jackson, who is on that bill.
Well, I know that she's actually supporting a ban on all fracking.
No, that's
That
not
wasn't
true.
what you were thanking her for.
No, I was
Okay.
thanking her for, they have a bill that both sides aren't happy with, and she's on it too.
Okay. I have a question. The Board of Supervisors has required our Resource Management Agency to put on their permit application whether the company is fracking, the oil company is fracking or not. And looking at our recent newsletter, we do dozens of permits for oil wells, and I'm wondering if that's a question that we ask on our permits.
It's not a question we ask at this time. It's something we can look at, and I'll work with county council to see if we, if we have authority to be asking that and what we do with the information.
Yeah, I would certainly hope we have authority to ask that, since we are also monitoring air quality levels, and in which case I would do the same kind of language we did at the Board of Supervisors, which is and other well stimulation technologies. So if I don't know if you need to bring that back to, or if that's just something that you can do.
We'll definitely be looking into it.
You'll look into doing that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I know we do have the representative from Dogger here. If anyone has any questions, not a one.
I'll go ahead and
Thank you, Councilmember.
take advantage of his presence here.
Yes, isn't it a great
Yes,
opportunity?
thank you.
We had hundreds of people out at that hearing that you were at, too.
Yes,
So we have
I
him
saw you there,
one-on-one
and
here.
Mr. Higgs from Mr. Zaragoza's office. Thank you for being here. I just ask you if you could comment on how members of the public could make comments, connect with you about their questions or interests.
Okay. We've actually been holding a series of workshops. We started actually last year when the focus was just hydraulic fracturing. And so we had a series of workshops, had here one at the Board of Supervisors meeting. And just recently, now with the Senate Bill 4 being passed, it captures other well stimulus operations such as acidizing. And we just had a workshop at the Ventura College just last week, January 8th. I believe the workshops are concluded for the well stimulus comments, but they are still receiving comments. You can just go to our division website, conservation.ca.gov, and we have a link there where you can provide comments. And I was at a manager's video conference meeting this morning prior to coming here. I think they've already received well over 6,000 or 7,000 comments, but there is still open comments. And then that is just for the development of what would be the draft regulations. There will be more opportunities for workshops coming up down the road once those draft regulations are presented. That'll all happen, I think, this summer. So there'll be plenty of opportunity, and we welcome comments from the public.
Is there a deadline then for people to make comments on this first phase?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is there a deadline for people to make comments?
I think the deadline is approaching for this round just to get the draft regulations going, but there'll be other opportunities for comments down the road, I think, spring and summertime. So, but I believe there is, but if you go to the website, I think it will go ahead and identify that cutoff date for this first round.
And is there a way for members of the public to get onto an email list, a listserv?
Yes, we also have that. And again, I recommend our website. We not only, have, we have just a wealth of information on the whole process, the history, and again, you can, there's a contact, you can call, you can send emails, and so we do welcome input from everyone in this process.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Yes, Councilmember Sharkey?
Yeah, actually, for Mr. Villegas, as we look at extraction, any new well is subject to new source review, and we have air quality rules that govern wells regardless of technique, don't we?
That's right. Absolutely. We have a fairly well-developed regulatory program for oil field operations, and we believe at this time it reasonably covers even the emissions from hydraulic fracturing.
Right. So our concern's not so much on whatever technique any operator may be using. It's the air quality impact, and that's the focus of this board. Is that correct? That's correct. Yeah. Thank you.
Supervisor Bennett?
I know it's not the focus of this board, but since you're here, I'll take advantage of this opportunity. What I'm really concerned with is the overlap between groundwater monitoring by the Regional Water Quality Control Board and Dogger. I experienced a situation where we thought there was a potential problem, went to the Groundwater Control Board, and they said, well, if there was a problem, Dogger would alert us to it. I went to Dogger. Dogger said, that's not our responsibility. Regional Water Quality Control Board's going to do that. Can you fill me in? Have there been any discussions or any clarification of that particular issue of exactly who's going to be the proactive agency and what are they going to do with regard to regulating groundwater quality?
Yes, it's a good question. As part of this whole process, there are other agencies involved besides the division, the Regional Board, Regional Water Quality Control Board, the air districts, and we are going to work out basically memorandums of agreement with all those different entities so that everyone's roles are clearly established. And they are the ones who are the lead for establishing what would be the groundwater monitoring criteria. But yes, if there's been any discrepancies in the past, all that will be addressed as part of this process because we will have memorandums of agreement established with all these various agencies. And in fact, they just saw an email. We have brought on a couple people. This is handled at the headquarters level, because it's such a big program. But they have established a staff to go ahead and address the issue that you're speaking about. They'll have one person who's basically coming on board at the direction of the director and the governor to handle these types of issues, make sure that everyone's responsibility is clearly established.
Okay, thank you.
We have some more questions. Councilmember Morgan?
I hope I'm not incorrect when I'm saying this, but when I was in Sacramento, there was a debate about whether or not to turn the water qualification wells over to the Water Resource Control Board from the Environmental Health Department. Have they done that yet? Have they changed that over yet?
Part of the process that I was just talking about, speaking about.
We can't do much until we get that solved first.
Yeah.
Who's going to be in charge of that?
Well, again, water quality, the groundwater monitoring, the lead agency is going to be the Regional Water Quality Control Board. If there's going to be a well stimulus process proposed, part of it is notification to all the property owners, and that's within 1,500 feet of the well location. And then they would have the opportunity to go ahead and request that their water well or whatever source of water be sampled prior to the process and after. And that part of the process will be the Regional Water Quality Control Board. They're the ones who have the expertise in water sampling and so forth. And the division is going to be the lead role, obviously, for the actual well work and that process.
I just have a question regarding the process. I know this EIR scoping process is looking at, it seemed like statewide. Will there be CEQA on specific wells? And how
I'll have to refer to my notes here on that one.
Okay.
There are two studies that are being done. Okay. The first is a well stimulation study, and that's conducted by the Secretary of the Natural Resources Agency, and that's required on or before January 1 of 2015. And that evaluates potential health and safety hazards and risk of well stimulation. The second study is an environmental impact report, which has to meet all of the requirements of CEQA, and that is to provide prevention on potential environmental impact from well stimulation. And the division, as the lead agency, must certify this by July 1 of 2015. And I believe at the workshop that we had last week at the college, I think Aspen Environmental is the contractor that will be doing that. As far as site-specific, you have to look at this process historically. Not every field has been hydraulically fractured. Not every field has had well stimulus. It's only in specific areas. And I know that some of the numbers I saw from last year, they ran a number on the total number of hydraulic fracturing jobs done from July 1, 2012 to July 1, 2013. There were a total of 1,000 done in the state. And of those 1,000, 800 were in South Belridge, which is Kern County. I think the next highest total was Lost Hills. I can tell you historically in our district, the one place that it has been going on since 1964, hydraulic fracturing, is in the Sespe oil field. Of the 450, and I am getting to answer your question, but
I appreciate it.
Of the 450 hydraulic fracturing jobs that have been done in our district here, 350 have been in the Sespe oil field. Some have been done in upper Ojai area, but with no drilling activity. That has not happened for many years. And then, so getting to your question, what they will look, I'm sure, is at the historical locations where this has occurred, and so they will target those areas and look at the environmental impact for those fields. And so it will be statewide, but I think there's going to be a focus on the areas where it's actually occurred. That's the data that you need for this report.
So maybe addendums or whatever may be done when you have one that isn't in a site that you have already included. That might be one way of approaching it.
I'm sure that they'll be looking at that too. You know, one of the big issues, one of the big things is, the Monterey Shale development. This is huge potential anyway, but if you look at the Monterey Shale, and I provided an overview of that, I think it was a year ago or so here, where we have had hydraulic fracturing in this district. It's not in the Monterey Shale, it's in the Sespe Formation. Sespe Formation in the Sespe oil field. And those jobs are done at roughly 4,000 to 5,000 feet, the basal Sespe. The Monterey Shale in this district, I don't see it as a huge change in activity or anything else. The Monterey Shale here is 20,000 feet. It plunges deeply under the Ventura County, and it hasn't. It's just not feasible at those depths. Where you are going to see a lot of development, and it's already starting to occur, is in Kern County. The Monterey Shale there is anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 feet deep, and there actually is quite a bit of activity over by Lost Hills and Schaffer. So that's where you're seeing that. So they will look at those areas.
Yes.
So not only historically fields that have had it done, but where there is potential for it to occur, they'll look at those even though it may be just in its fledgling state, or even areas that haven't been developed yet. They'll look at those potential areas.
Okay, and I just think that's important, so you at least know if a new area comes on board, what the ramifications are. That aquifer may be in a different location, and all those. Then also hearing about the ones that are being drilled off our coast here using fracking, and that oversight, those permits, are they all done at the state level, or are any of those done locally?
I can only answer for our district here. What we have basically offshore right now is just 2 offshore oil fields. We have basically the Rincon offshore, which is the island that you see out there, which is the Miley Formation. They do not do any hydraulic fracturing on that, nor have they ever done that. It's a very shallow zone. It doesn't lend itself to that. The other offshore field is going to be West Montalvo, where Veneco has been drilling some extended reach wells from onshore locations offshore. Those two, none have been hydraulically fractured. They're going after the Eocene cold water formation. They actually pass through the Monterey there, but they're not going after it. And speaking to them, they have no plans to do any hydraulic fracturing. So that's all the offshore activity we have. Anything outside of that is federal waters, so that would be what's formerly known as the Minerals Management Service. They would be the ones who have oversight on that.
And just specifically, it is your agency, not, for example, the county or any local jurisdiction that has the ability to do any oversight of permitting. That's all done at the state level for the coast drilling projects?
Again, I can just speak for our agency. Yes, we are going to be the lead agency for this process, but it doesn't preclude other entities from exploring what they may like to have authority for.
And you say there's going to be no fracking. Will there be no other well stimulation techniques also in the coastal waters, acidation, et cetera?
That I don't know.
Okay. Will you?
But that would be
eventually you'll have to be informed now after January 1, right?
Yeah, there's already that process right now. Again, the regulations have to be in place no later than January 1, 2015, with Senate Bill 4 being approved and signed September 20th of this year. There is that, I'll call it a grace period or whatever, but operators are still required to go ahead and file a notification with us, with the regional board. It has to be reviewed and approved. It also has to be posted on a website. They're still obligated to go ahead and, with the regional board, have a water management plan, which means basically where's the source of your water for your hydraulic fracturing and what are you doing with it after. A groundwater monitoring plan is required, and they are still required, even during this grace period, public notification of any property owner. And so they essentially have to comply with what we envision will be the final rules or regs by January 1, 2015.
So if they're going to engage in well stimulation like acidation, you will be informed even this year before your regulations. Thank you.
Yes.
Supervisor
The quick
Zaragoza?
question I had was, there any fracking happening in the Oxnard Plain? Any fracking happening in the Oxnard Plain at all?
I'm sorry, could you please speak?
Is there any fracking happening in the Oxnard Plain?
No, there's no fracking activity going on there. I mean, as far as fracking companies, I mean, really the big players, there's 3 companies that do this work in the state, is Schlumberger, BJ, and Halliburton.
Okay, good, thank you.
And we-
Final question, the injection well for oil wastewater that we have on the
Yeah,
Oxnard
the
Plain,
Antara
injection
site.
wells monitored by you or Regional Water Control Board?
Those are permitted through us. The site that you're speaking of, so people may not know, is Antara. They operate what is called a commercial water disposal site. It's located just off of Willie Road between Rice and Rose. They have 2 commercial disposal wells, and they have 1 producing well on that location. And that operation has been in place since 1998. Prior operator is called Anodyne, and it's now Antara. That is permitted through us. There are other agencies involved with those. Now, we handle basically the well mechanics, the well testing, and all the downhole aspects of that operation. But there are some surface handling. It's a waste disposal site. It takes basically Class 2 fluids like drilling mud, or when they produce in the tanks, they'll have what they call tank bottoms. It's oil and solids. But anyway, that material comes to the site, and what Antara does is they dehydrate it. They'll basically remove the fluids from the solids. They'll take, and that's done through a centrifuge or a press, they'll take those fluids, including the produced water from that one oil and gas well. That goes into those injection wells. And we monitor that through testing, casing testing. They'll do surveys on the wells to verify that it's going into the intended zones of injection. The zones that it's going into, the depth is at 4,600 feet down to 5,200 feet is the depth zone that they're going into, the Miocene and the Topanga. And the surface handling is Regional Water Quality Control Board, because those solids are basically mixed, and they're used as, and I'm getting above the scope of my authority, but I'm familiar with the site. That material goes to Toland Landfill and to Chiquita, I think, landfill. Thank you. It goes to those landfills, and that material, again, that's through the regional board. It all has to be tested. And that's used as barrier material, as they raise these landfills higher, just for odor control and so forth. So there are multiple agencies involved with that site.
And who tested the aquifer that's at 4,600 to 5,200 feet down there to make sure that that's a suitable place to
Yes, that
place
was
that through Dogger?
Yes, and through Dogger and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. When that project was originally proposed in '98, we have primacy through EPA for Class 2 wells, and there's a protocol we have to follow, and that's called an area of review. We look at all the wells that penetrate that zone, or even shallower than that zone, in a quarter mile of that whole project. We make sure that all the wells in that area cannot be a conduit for migration up to a freshwater zone. And so there's that review. We look at the well mechanics. There's actually there's testing that's required of that well before it's put into operation. And so that is done through us. We send a copy of the complete project application to the regional board, and they have opportunity for comments and review. And so every project that we review, we have to send it to the regional board and essentially get their blessing, and that's under our primacy agreement with EPA.
Can I ask a quick question on top
I
of
know
it?
Councilmember Ramirez also has a question.
Just a quick
Go
question on
ahead,
top of it.
Supervisor Garza.
Who checks the material that's coming in and by truck? The type of material that's coming in?
It's a whole variety of things, but essentially it's what we call Class 2 fluids, but it's going to be basically drilling mud. It could be essentially anything that goes into a well or comes out of a well, as far as the operation is considered a Class 2
But
fluid.
what I'm asking is, how do we, I know it's supposed to be Class 2, but who checks it to make sure it's Class 2?
Antara, they're required to have it's actually a company out of Santa Maria that it's a state certified lab that does analytical on everything that goes on that site. They are required to go ahead and test it. They are not certified to take hazardous material. There are other sites in the state that do that, but they are not required. And so if whatever they receive, were determined to be hazardous, they would not be able to put it in the wells. They would not be able. They would have to make arrangements to get it to another, essentially Class 1, a hazardous site.
So there's a manifest that says it's a Class 2?
Yes, and it follows all the proper protocols. They send us copies of all that. And but essentially, yeah, they are not certified to take hazardous materials. They don't want to jeopardize their operation, and so everything is done through a state certified lab. It's a company out of Santa Maria whose name escapes me, but they retain all that documentation, as a requirement, but also for their benefit too, to make sure that they don't receive anything that they're not
To make sure it's
allowed.
Class 2, not Class 1.
Class 2 fluids, yes. There's a whole list. I mean, I can't.
Yeah.
But there's a whole list of Class 2 fluids. But essentially, if something goes into a well and it's produced back, that's a Class 2 fluid, and that's under guidelines by EPA to us.
And Councilmember Ramirez? And
Thank you.
Councilmember Morgan.
Yeah, I appreciate this discussion. I know we're the Air Pollution Control Board, but there is a lot of concern about water, and I would say, I'd just ask you, particularly there's a lot of concern about Antara and what's going on with our aquifers, including the drought, et cetera. But could you provide information on how people could find out about the reports on Antara and what the permits? Where could a member of the public go online to find out?
All the well records, every well record in the district has been scanned, and so we have all this information on our website. Every piece of information in those well records is scanned. It's on our site. I'm trying to think what else. And so, I mean, any requested information is available. It's all public information. So, but I mean, I'll just say in general terms, everything that we have, every record we have, we're trying to go paperless, has been scanned and put on our site. So I would suggest just go to the well records, all of the historical data when those wells were first drilled, plus all the stuff that I spoke about as part of the review process and so forth is in those well records. But again, it's we try to be very transparent. That's why we have everything posted on our site. But if there's any information that someone thinks of that they can't find, they can just contact me, and it's all public information.
Would you, for benefit of people watching or taking a look at this after the fact, would you give us your contact information to speak it?
Yeah, contact information,
Yes.
sure.
Could you speak it for
Okay,
the
well,
record?
I mean, for me, Bruce Hesson, Hesson, I'm the district supervisor. And my contact, the main number is 805-654-4761.
And a website?
Website is conservation. This is our main website, conservation.ca for California.gov for government. And again, you go there, you can look at production information, injection information, the individual well records. It's all been scanned. And you can search, our district is called District 2. We're one of 6 oil and gas districts. When you go to the website, just look at District 2, and they can search a variety of ways, either by field or by operator. So look under Antara, and I mean, it's all there. If anyone has any difficulty with the website, our secretary at the office gets calls routinely to help guide them through that process, so we're more than glad to help.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
And I do note that we received a letter from Sally Coleman, who's the president of Antara now, who said that they will no longer be taking any fracking chemicals into their well. But it's always good to have that oversight, obviously.
Yeah.
So appreciate you coming here today, and you yes.
We talked about the fracking in the muds and so on and so forth coming up. In your experience, how we have experience in the past years of fracking.
Mm-hmm.
How much of those drilling muds and things that have come up, have been considered hazardous waste? Percentage-wise, on your best guess.
Yeah, well, the process, I mean, the process involves, most of the hydraulic fracturing, if not all of it now, is on a new well. And so what they'll do is they'll drill the well, and they'll run their casing, and when they run the casing, they'll do a primary cement job. They'll bring cement basically up the annular space to create a sealed system, if you will. And then they target a specific zone. I'll use Sespe as an example. They go after the basal Sespe. And what they'll do is they'll do a casing pressure test, verify that everything is, the last thing the operator wants to do is do a test and part their casing, damage it because they just spent several $1 million drilling it. But they have been doing, this process in CESP since '64. But what they'll essentially do is they apply for a very short duration, maybe an hour, hour and a half, enough pressure to get the frac fluid, which is predominantly water, but it does have chemicals in there. It does have chemicals, the gelling agents to go ahead and increase viscosity. Once they get the formation parted, they'll introduce proppant. It's a very small sand, and then what they'll do is they'll go ahead and decrease the viscosity of that frac fluid to allow the backflow. And so the majority of the sand stays in place, but the remainder of the material is going to be coming out over time, if not, say, the first 30 days or whatever the well is going to be. And this process is done typically just once on a well. Once you go ahead and frac a well, you don't do it again. It either works sufficiently or it doesn't, but you don't really try it again. But that will be produced back, and that essentially goes back into their system. It goes to their tanks. They'll separate out the water from the oil, and that gets re-injected into either their water flood wells, water disposal wells. Right. And, it's for all intents and purposes a closed system. They want to keep it all contained. And so, to answer your question, these are occurring at depths, say at 4,000, 5,000 feet. When they drill that well, as part of the well completion, they'll run surface casing. Surface casing will go past any fresh water. In the Oxnard Plains, we have those aquifers very well delineated. There's the Point Mugu and the Fox and Canyon aquifer, and we have mapping from the Groundwater Management Agency that we've had for years. Anytime that well is drilled and completed, those zones are isolated. They're completely isolated from what's going on beneath in the formation. And this is something that I think Tim Kustic, when he was here last year speaking about hydraulic fracturing, we are now having specific regulations put in place for the process. But the well completion techniques that have been going on for, 50 years, those are designed to protect those upper fresh waters from anything that's going on below. And so I hope that answers your question.
My question was, of the muds that you're talking about, some of them have to go to hazardous waste facilities?
Yeah.
What do you think the percentage of what comes up has to go to hazardous waste facilities?
Well, muds, basically it's water with barite and bentonite. The whole purpose is just when you're drilling the well to make sure that you don't have a blowout, so right. You're going as far as chemicals in there, again, there's a variety of things that go into it, but under our primacy agreement with EPA, they recognize that, this industry uses chemicals, and they drill these wells. If that is produced back out or that is recovered, EPA tells us that's fine for that to go back into a water disposal well or a water flood well. It's just the process. So again, it's going back into an oil formation, which is not used for any water, and these oil formations too, typically the salinities, it's like seawater. It's 26,000 parts per million. And so
you're saying not a lot goes off to hazardous waste. They take care of it there, repump it back in the wells and so on.
Yeah, correct. Again, you're talking hazardous waste. In my mind, you're talking about refined product like gasolines and other things like that.
I mean, just being taken to a facility, that's all.
Oh, how is it taken?
No. How much of it is being taken
how much
to
of
a facility?
It varies just on the level of activity. I mean, I think Antera operates 13 trucks that they take. It just varies by time of year. Just on the amount of. I don't have a specific answer for you. I know the injection rates on the wells. I see that, but as far as solid materials, again, once they separate out that water and it goes into these injection wells, as far as the solid material on that site and so forth, I'm not directly involved with that process when that goes from there over to the the landfills.
Sure.
Okay.
So some goes to hazardous, some goes to landfills, but you don't know the percentage right now.
I don't off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
That's all I need. Thank you.
Yeah, I know with Councilmember Tucker. Go ahead. Well, I know that particularly not in California, they do a lot of gas, fracking for gas, and that has a lot of methane. Getting back to our board, we're looking at air quality. Is methane much of an issue out here?
It isn't. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I know about the Marcellus Shale. I followed that quite close. That's It's a shale formation that basically has a lot of entrained gas. Those hydraulic fracturing jobs back in Pennsylvania, because I have some friends who still live back there, I speak to them about that. Those are enormous jobs. They're using 2 million, 3 million gallons of water for these horizontal wells. The process that we have here is different. It's not, yes, there's tight formation, but it's an oil and gas formation. We're going after, predominantly, I mean, these jobs are to increase your oil production. Gas is associated gas, it's a byproduct. The stuff back east is primarily gas. It's all gas production from those. So to answer your question, these jobs here, no, it's not an issue. Again, everything is a sealed system. When they get the Halliburton out there or Schlumberger or whatever, they do a series of pre-tests on all their piping and everything to make sure everything's solid. And I've been on a number of these jobs over the years. They don't want any fugitive emission releases, and credit the APCD. They do have a quite a very robust program out in the oil fields. They go out and check for fugitive emissions. So I don't see that as an issue here like it perhaps is back in Pennsylvania.
Councilmember Tucker, you had one too.
So, in listening to the discussion, it sounds like there's a lot of different entities that are collecting data that are specific to what their entity is. Is there any discussions on how to pull all that data together to take a look at the bigger picture and the bigger scope of the wells that are being done? Number one. Number two is there was some discussion earlier about which jurisdiction would have oversight. Is there a way, is there any discussions on how to collaborate so it's more of a one-stop shop if somebody has a concern or would like to look at information, so that way there's more of a collaborative effort between all the different entities?
Yeah. That's a good question. There's actually two issues here. One is, operators right now, we have asked them to put on frac focus. Anytime they're doing a frac job, it goes on that site. The division will be developing, as part of SB4, our own site. But, from this point moving forward, anyone that's proposing a well stimulus process is going to have to post that on site right from the very beginning. To go back to the historical aspect of it, we have done a review in our district, and again, we've identified about 450 hydraulic fracturing jobs. And what was interesting was that, even though there wasn't a permit process per se over the years, operators are required to submit to our office a history. Anytime they do any well work, where they're altering the casing and so forth, they have to submit a history showing what they've done. And we reviewed our well records. We came up with roughly 450. Jeff Kuiper with Los Padres Forest Watch, who I communicate with quite a bit, he actually had a staff member that he hired to go through all of our well records, which are all posted on our website. And they came up with essentially the same numbers. And so historically there is information in there, but the level of detail changes. Some operators may provide a lot of specific detail on the process. Some may have just a very generalized, we did an acid job, we did a frac job, but it's in there. So as part of this whole study, I'm sure that all the districts are going to be tasked with the project of reviewing historically their well records and identify, at least come up with numbers on where, what's been done historically. So, but from this point forward, everything has to be posted on Frac Focus or the division's website, once that's developed. And so anyone who's doing this process, and it's going to be also not only just, posting, it's going to show a map of the county or the state. It's going to show where these things are going on. You'll visually be able to say, hey, yeah, there's 5 wells being, proposed for fracturing in Sespe. Anyone can get on that site and see that.
Good questions. Obviously, there's tremendous interest, and I know you've been very busy lately, but thank you for coming. Appreciate
You're very welcome,
your
and
answering our
I'm
questions.
sure I'll be discussing this with you again. I'd be more than glad to do so.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, can we have a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, that motion passes. And now, drum roll. It is a presentation of a service award to Michael Villegas for 25 years of service at the Air Pollution Control District.
No, he can't retire.
I have a certificate. I'm going to come down and bring it to you and shake your hand for hanging in there with us, for excellent service to your board, great appreciation of your staff, and just an expression of our appreciation. We'll give you this certificate. We should have a pin. I'll get you a county pin. But just thank you so much for your good service. And if the board has any comments. David Pollock, who's new here, will know about what a great executive... Okay, I was just saying, Mr. Pollock, who's new here today, will find, I'm sure, quite rapidly how responsive and helpful Mr. Villegas is, how knowledgeable he is, how much dedication he has to his job, and I know you'll come to appreciate him as we all do, and I just want to thank you for your 25 years of excellent service. Congratulations. Do you ever think it would go this long?
Well, I want to thank you, Supervisor Parks, and all the members of the board. It's been an honor to serve your board in this community here in Ventura County. I love Ventura County, and I've let you know in the past that, my passion is to finally meet those federal standards. I've told my staff, our job is to protect the air, and really our smoggy spots, Simi Valley and Ojai, with Simi being a little more so. And I've always said, let's take care of Sarah Baxter out there. And I don't know if you know who she is, but she is probably the cross-country phenom this country has ever seen in the history of the sport. So
do it for Sarah.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, and if you just, I'd really like to keep working towards the next standard. We met the 84 Park Pavilion standard. I didn't even think that was possible 15 years ago. But we're working towards the 75 Park Pavilion standard, and I think it's actually doable by 2021. And if they tighten it again, well, we'll just have to see how that goes. But it's been a pleasure working for your board.
Is that going to take you another 25 years?
It's not going to take another 25 years.
Mike, if we can find some electric buses, you'll be in better shape. We'll put them all over the county.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know on electric buses, I was going to note that I just received an email from Roadrunner that they're going to be looking at one.
I know. I've been talking to them.
So out in the Camarillo
They're looking at
area.
the one in Palmdale.
Yes.
Well, you have certainly seen the air quality improve over the last 20 years significantly, and all because of your hard work, right?
Well, not my fault. My predecessor, Dick Baldwin, and the staff have done a wonderful job. And our monitoring group goes out and they measure the air quality, and they tell us, how high we are above the standard. Then our planning group comes in and comes up with a plan on how we're going to close that delta, how we're going to reduce those emissions to get there. Then our rule development group goes to work on developing those rules that are turned into permits by our permit engineers. And finally, our inspectors go out and make sure everyone's complying. And then we go back out and monitor the air. And lo and behold, over the years, we've continued to make great progress and meet those standards on time, in some cases ahead of schedule.
Thank you for your great service.
You do a great job. Really appreciate your service. And another perk you can have is free electric charging in Oxnard. There you go.
Don't let the attorney get hold with it.
I also want to really thank, this is a supportive board. I look at some of the other agencies when we get together at Capcoa with my other counterparts, and not everyone has a supportive board, so I count my blessings.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And with that, our board will be adjourned here, and then we have a standing committee meeting, and then the Board of Supervisors will be back after that.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.